So, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to our session to talk about the future of wireless. Welcome on the last day. I'll do a short introduction, and then I'll let my panelists introduce themselves and the topic a little bit. So we get up to speed, and I'm sure some more people will come in. It's a long way to get here. So yesterday morning, Vincent Garnier told us here, he was talking about the penetration of fiber, and it's kind of surprisingly low. I've been doing this a number of years now, and of course everything steadily goes up. And while we have about 75% coverage across Europe, which is great, the actual penetration, the people that take subscription, is about 40%. And it means in combination that the people that have access to fiber, only about half of them take it. And it's interesting because we all know how great fiber is if you can get access to it. But clearly something is holding people back. And I'm sure there are many reasons of this. But here today, one of the reasons that we will talk about is the wireless connectivity. We know fiber can already easily deliver 10 gig, low latency, wonderful basis to provide lots of good services that we'll also hear a little bit about later. But the wireless connectivity is not quite delivering that. On paper, some of the PHY rates and things that you get, they're pretty good. But in practice, the distance, interference, all of these things matter. And it's not quite as good. So this is one thing that's holding us back. Because in the end, wireless connectivity is what's needed to connect to the end user devices to deliver real services. Now, how far the fiber gets towards the end user will determine, at least in part, what kind of technology is used for that last wireless connectivity. So if you are living in an ultra-rural area where it is very difficult to get fiber to the home, then the fiber may go to the towers that are used for mobile connectivity, and then you use something like fixed wireless access to get to the home, or perhaps even satellite connectivity that is becoming more available. But even when the fiber gets to the home, it's not enough. Then you need Wi-Fi for in-home usage. Now, before we start, there's one thing I wanted to clarify a little bit, and we'll get back to this a couple of times, no doubt. But as you know, the theme for today is Wi-Fi 8 and 6G. And I think everybody understands, even though it's not finished in definition and definitely not in standardization, but the idea of Wi-Fi 8. But 6G is a little bit more tricky, because 6G can mean a couple of different things. So on the one side, 6G can refer to the mobile communication technology being defined by 3GPP, similar to 5G that we know today. But it's also used as a term for a vision of the future, so-called network of networks, for more broader connectivity. So that doesn't involve only 3GPP's 6G implementation, but also other access technologies. And we'll get even also to how that might relate to fiber. So while none of the wireless technologies is as good as fiber, all of it will be needed to make us go forward. So let's talk about the future of this wireless connectivity, the wireless communication, and how it fits the fiber deployment. So as mentioned, we have a great lineup of speakers. We'll have a very interesting conversation. And I will let each one do their own introduction. So Elisabeth, over to you. And there's your...
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining this very exciting discussion, I believe, that we will have about the future wireless use cases that fiber will be supporting. My name is Elisabeth Fittori. I am the Executive Director of the Smart Networks and Services Joint Undertaking. You might ask, what is the Smart Networks and Services Joint Undertaking, and how are we connected with fiber? So let me first, before I go into the slide, but I would just really like to leave the slide there for you to have a look at and kind of think about the network of networks vision that has been mentioned by Martin. The Smart Networks and Services Joint Undertaking is a public-private partnership. It's a public-private partnership, a so-called institutionalized. It's too early in the morning for difficult expressions and long expressions. So it's an institutionalized partnership that has been established by EU law, more specifically a council regulation. And these structured partnerships, we are 10 joint undertakings covering very different areas that are of strategic importance to the European Union. And our core activity is really to support, by EU funding, research and innovation activities in the field of the development of 6G as a new, ultimately globally standardized communication system. We also have another mission, which is to support 5G deployment, and in particular to coordinate the strategic deployment agenda related to cross-border 5G corridors. But the core activity is really related to the development and research and innovation actions for 6G. And for that, we have a total envelope of 900 million euros from the public side. So that's Horizon Europe funding. And this is matched by the private side. Our kind of partners in the public-private partnership are the European Commission and the 6G Industry Association as the private member. Our governance structure and decision-making in the organization is very much based on this model of deep collaboration and partnership, on the one hand between the public and the private side, so in order to maximize and to spend most efficiently into research activities public money, ultimately. We are closely associated also with national governments who are having a strategic advisory role in the so-called states representative group. And we also work with a wider array of stakeholders in our stakeholders group. And last but not least, we also, given the global standardization dimension, we also work on international collaboration. We have dedicated projects, mostly in the field of AI, which have mirror projects going on, for example, in Japan, this is the latest edition, but also South Korea and the US. So I think I wanted to take the time a little bit to introduce the concept of the public and private partnership, and also to emphasize how our work is extremely forward-looking, extremely futuristic, and I will show that to you also in the timeline of our program. As Martin said, 6G is envisaged to be much more than an upgrade of the radio access network. So indeed, the 6G vision, which is a consensual vision that has been developed by Networld Europe, which is actually a global organization with more than 1,000 members. That is where our strategic research and innovation agenda and the 6G vision comes from. It foresees really sort of a network of networks concept indeed, and foresees really quite significant technology breakthroughs, which will be different from the concept of connectivity as we know it today. I will just pick a few elements from the slide and then move on. one of the key technology breakthrough areas on which several of our projects are actually actively working is the integration of non-terrestrial and terrestrial networks. In the vision of 6G, it is foreseen to be sort of a ubiquitous, even global coverage. And for that, I think having a breakthrough of integrating and ultimately unifying in a seamless architecture non-terrestrial and terrestrial technologies would be a key step. Another key element is sensing. It is foreseen to be a sensing and positioning a network. Of course, you might ask, okay, so what are sensors and cameras are for? Clearly, they will remain in the future. However, most likely, they will be complemented, and also all these different data sources will be actually integrated and analyzed by AI, which is, I think, another key breakthrough element. This will be the first network architecture that will be native AI. And then, of course, there are other key elements which we take into account in kind of our program, which is really alignment and impact, positive impact on key public policy and societal challenges. So, of course, key objectives in our program is for the new technology to be sustainable and secure by design, and of course, very much looking at kind of the ongoing convergence trend in technology, where different adjacent technologies are being increasingly used and converged together. So as the last point, you see softwarization, computing, and open interfaces, which really points in this direction. So we think that if we take this basic kind of vision of network of networks, of course, the integration and use of fiber in this integrated architecture will be an extremely important part, and it will bring enormous benefits to the overall 6G network. Yes, I have to speed up. What you see on this slide, and I will not dwell on this also because we are of the shortness of time, is that our projects, in particular our flagship project, has, in cooperation with some national projects, has worked on the key use case families of 6G. Which will be, of course, quite different from how we see use case families in 5G, and they have been identified very early on in the process. What I would emphasize is that these new use cases could be potentially translated into revenue-generating business cases, network-based services using these new capabilities such as sensing and positioning, for example. I mentioned that we have...
I think we will get back to some of the topics that you want to talk about. If we can move on, then we can focus on the discussion.
Maybe just 2 more minutes, please. So as I mentioned, we take a phased approach, which is very much aligned with the global standardization process, with a view to having the 6G system in a pre-commercial state ready by 2030. What I just wanted to highlight here, and excuse me for this, Martin, is that we do have ongoing projects about fiber integration. And in fact, in our next work program, for which our call for proposals will only be open later this year, we have a dedicated topic to optical networks and photonics. I will stop here and look forward very much to the discussion. Thank you very much for your attention.
So good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin Robinson. I'm the President and CEO of Wi-Fi Alliance. So I know we're here talking about fiber, but of course, from our perspective, when you look at the future of connectivity, there are really kind of three technologies that are going to be strong complements to one another and ultimately essential to delivering the future of connectivity. And it's going to be fiber, cellular, and Wi-Fi. And then you can probably mix in some others like non-terrestrial as well. But at the end of the day, these are kind of the pillars of connectivity in our society, and we certainly see that as the case moving forward. So a little bit just about Wi-Fi Alliance. Wi-Fi Alliance is the worldwide network of companies that brings you Wi-Fi. We're made up of more than 900 companies from around the world, Europe, Asia, Americas, et cetera, that have been driving connectivity, particularly indoors, for the last 25 years. One of the most important things that the Alliance does is we help drive subsequent generations of Wi-Fi technology. So we've now kind of simplified this with things like Wi-Fi 5, 6, 7, and eventually Wi-Fi 8, which I'm sure we'll get into as we get into the panel. But really, it's the Alliance that is instrumental in ensuring that each of these subsequent generations deliver on the promises of that generation, that they work well together, and that we have a rich ecosystem and mature ecosystem of devices and services that deliver this much-needed connectivity around the globe. There's an incredible amount of technology work going on within the Alliance beyond the generations, everything from sub 1 meter indoor location for wayfinding in a location like this, which might have actually helped a little bit for me yesterday when I was trying to find this room all the way back here, to proximity ranging, things like that, to just driving better quality of service in end user devices. And I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit in the panel. But I think in general, what you see is the natural progression of Wi-Fi. For many years, it's been about this top number on the box. How many hundreds of megabits, or now how many gigabits or tens of gigabits per second you can theoretically get out of Wi-Fi. Really starting with Wi-Fi 6, and now particularly Wi-Fi 7 and into the future, it's going to be more and more about how we deliver reliable, consistent user experiences over Wi-Fi. And I think that's an incredibly good complement to what fiber is able to deliver in terms of low latencies, obviously very high performance, but a level of reliability you get through those fixed networks indoors. So that kind of leads into one of the other major focus areas for the Alliance, which is the integration with complementary technologies for seamless connectivity. It's why the Alliance works very closely with broadband providers, with the cellular community to how do we ensure that you can get this seamless experience, for example, roaming off of a cellular network outdoors to a Wi-Fi network, which is the predominant indoor connectivity technology. I know in some environments indoors, Wi-Fi moves upwards of 90% plus of indoor traffic. And in fact, when you look at internet connectivity overall, Wi-Fi is moving roughly 50% of all internet traffic is going over a Wi-Fi link. So again, how we work in a complementary nature with fixed broadband technologies, with service providers to be able to better manage the Wi-Fi that is on the end of that fixed broadband connection. Those are some of the key focus areas for Wi-Fi, as well as how we integrate seamlessly with wide area technologies like cellular. Now, the final focus area that I'd like to touch on has to do with global spectrum availability and harmonization. And this is one of the areas that's incredibly critical to not only Wi-Fi, but to any technology that relies upon Wi-Fi for those last few meters of connectivity to the devices. Right, there will certainly be devices that plug directly into a fiber or a wired connection, but predominantly this is done over Wi-Fi. So the success or the lack of success, let's say, in Wi-Fi being able to deliver on its promises over spectrum is going to have an impact on other technologies. And so again, I'm sure we'll get into this. Quite a bit of focus on the 6 gigahertz band globally is something that the Alliance is very focused on. So in general, I would just say very high level, Wi-Fi industry is becoming much more performance driven. And I would characterize performance, again, as more than the number on the box. Performance is things like, yes, it's speeds, but it's also low latency, consistent low latency, and reliability. How do we even get into applications such as more fulfillment center, automation, factory use cases? So these are just a collection of various programs that we've been working on around QoS management, things like data elements that let service providers understand what's actually happening in a home networking environment. from both the device perspective and also just from the infrastructure perspective, what is going on there. Things like device metrics that actually allow us to characterize the performance that you're getting out of client devices. So these are just a number of things that are helping us to better drive consistent performance and quality that go beyond what each generation of Wi-Fi delivers. And then finally, when we look at the complete broadband solution, fixed broadband, what does it look like? It's FTTH, or in some cases FTTR. That's paired with Wi-Fi 7, and essentially that is paired with 6 gigahertz, because that is a key aspect. We know, and in fact, if you look at this box on the right, we did a study around spectrum requirements, and it was looking at a very typical multi-dwelling unit, apartment complex in Europe with typical construction requirements. And what we found is that without the full 1200 megahertz, it is unlikely that you are even going to be able to deliver 1 gigabits per second to every device in those various apartments. And it's on the order of magnitude of roughly 50 to 60% of that area would actually get gigabit connectivity. So what does that mean when you're trying to sell fiber? Well, yes, you're selling 1 gigabit, 2, 3, 5, and even higher gigabit plans. But if you ultimately cannot get that to the device and that's not experienced by the end user, you have a problem. And so we were able to go from 50 to 60% probability of gigabit connectivity up to very close to 100%, basically a rounding error for 100% probability with the full 1200 megahertz. The other thing we're seeing, particularly in Europe, is that Europe is fiber rich, but Wi-Fi poor in many senses, where in many countries, the use of legacy Wi-Fi is limiting the potential of these multi-gigabit networks, surprising the number of networks that are still on Wi-Fi 4 and even Wi-Fi 5. And again, that's really just providing headwinds for the ultimate success of fiber. And we'll talk, all these kind of numbers about Wi-Fi 7, higher speeds, nearly double the upload speed and reducing latency by about 11%. So again, we'll get into more on the panel itself, but that's just a little bit of an introduction in terms of some of the areas that the Alliance is very much focused on in ensuring the broadband technologies like fiber can be successful. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Christoph Sommerberg from Deutsche Glasfaser. And we are a genuine fiber operator, so now a black sheep on this panel. But fortunately not on the conference. And why are we talking about Wi-Fi? Because Wi-Fi, and as Kevin already put it out, it's a very integral complement of the user experience in fiber. Just to give you a short view on who is Deutsche Glasfaser, we are the largest altnet fiber provider in Germany, and we predominantly deploy in rural and suburban areas. And we've been around since 2007 with one stream and 2011 with the other stream. You see, we've secured enough financing. We've put up more than 2 million lines already. So therefore, our customer base is huge, and our customer base demands a user experience that mirrors the speed we deliver by the fiber in their home use. And now I come to the topic of the panel. Why are we concerned more about the performance of the Wi-Fi? Usually our customer base has larger living spaces in a rural or suburban environment than in the usual urban setting. So they need to cover more room. They have larger homes, so they need stronger Wi-Fi to experience what they got in the basement from the fiber. And that's why we were the first in Germany to introduce Wi-Fi 6E, so using part of the 6 gigahertz band that Kevin already talked about. And we saw a very significant leap in performance for the end user. And we saw also a significant leap in the willingness of the consumer, of the end user, to choose sophisticated Wi-Fi products to really feel the difference. And therefore, we offer special Wi-Fi bundles to bring the performance of Wi-Fi 6E into the home. And we see also that because we have the larger living space there, that 80% of the 40% of our customers that use the special Wi-Fi bundle, they also buy extenders to cover all their homes. And if we are allowed to manage the system, we can also see how the speeds that are generated also or already through this truncated spectrum of 6 gigahertz. And therefore, we can see up to 500 megs in one home supported by Wi-Fi. And therefore, for us, that's an indication that Wi-Fi is the key ingredient to make fiber experience happen. And therefore, we support not only the 6E and the drive for a complete set of Wi-Fi 7, so the complete set of frequency for indoor and also the outdoor use, because on your patio you will also want to use Wi-Fi, or in larger venues like this, in schools, wherever you are inside or outside. And basically, that's my first, the first intro for why we see fiber driving Wi-Fi and the other way around, and the rest will be in the discussion. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending this session. My name is Shema Sayak. I'm working for Orange. I'm in charge of the so-called home innovation domain, which means that I'm looking at what happens when the home is connected with very high broadband, which means usually fiber, or when there is a problem with actually the connection. I wanted to make maybe some different statements from my colleagues in the panel. In most of our geographies, especially France, Spain, or Romania, for instance, now the number of home passed is above 90%, which means that we can consider that fiber has been delivered or is on the way to be delivered. And that means that the expectations of our customers are changing because they have very high broadband, they have very high connectivity, and now what they want is the homeland, what happens in the home space, to work perfectly and to deliver high bandwidth, low latency, and reliability. And then when it doesn't work, then we have to rely on other technologies, typically 5G or tomorrow 6G technology as a replacement. And for instance, we are deploying fixed wireless access in some areas where actually we cannot deliver very high fixed broadband. But when it works, and we have to bear that in mind, is most of our customers see Wi-Fi especially as a kind of magic. They don't know really how it works, but it works. And as an operator, we need to make sure that it works. They don't really care about Wi-Fi 5, 6, 7, or 8. They just want something that works. And we need to make sure that the magic happens. What do I mean by magic? The Wi-Fi has to be very simple to use, very efficient, and people don't actually want to get into, dashboard or displays or configurations. And if we consider ourselves as magicians, usually we don't reveal our tricks. So it has to be seamless and it has to be simple. And at the end, it has to be about the quality of service and the quality of experience. And by the way, these are two different elements. Quality of service usually is a kind of technical metric. Like, you have a certain amount of bandwidth or a certain amount of reliability. But what people expect also is quality of experience. How can I download, for instance, Netflix movie? Is it going to work? When I'm doing a Teams session working from home, is it going to be very reliable? So this is really the challenge for us. Making the assumption that there is very high broadband delivered to the homes, how do we make sure that the promise of bandwidth, reliability, efficiency is being kept as an operator? Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Guillaume Lebrun. I'm working for Meta. And for us, when we talk about wireless application, we really try to understand what it means from an end user perspective. So what are the wireless applications that end user will be using in the future? And to some extent, it means what are the devices that people will use after your smartphone, your laptop, what you're using today. So some of you may be using smartwatches already, but allow me to introduce you to another set of devices, which are smart glasses. So the glasses that I'm wearing right now, the Meta Ray-Ban smart glasses, they are the same form factor as normal glasses from Ray-Ban, and they just weigh 8 grams more. And in these 8 grams, you have cameras, processor, touchpad, microphone, speakerphone. So the question is, why come up with a new device? And the reason for that is that it allows you a more natural interface with the next generation of application, whether it's mobile application or artificial intelligence. To give you some example, I like skiing. And when you're skiing, you don't want to take your smartphone out to take a picture or take a video. And you can just do that with the glasses just by saying, hey, Meta, take a picture. Or take a video or these kind of things. You can take a phone call. Everything is more natural. So to take it one step further, we're going to try to do a little demo. Usually these things are very scary, but I'm going to ask Shem to come on stage to help me. And basically, I'm going to try to demonstrate live translation. So I will pretend that I don't understand French, and Shem is going to pretend that he doesn't understand English.
He doesn't understand French, by the way.
And then, hopefully, you will get to experience how the glasses can translate a foreign language to you. I mean, in the future, it may be like Hindi or Japanese, something a little bit more complex than French and English. But let's start.
Starting live translation from French to English.
Bonjour Guillaume, je suis vraiment ravi de te revoir ici à Amsterdam.
Hello, Guillaume. I'm really glad to see you here in Amsterdam.
Hi, Shem. How are you doing? What's up in Orange?
Well, oh sorry, I have to speak French. Je suis ravi d'être ici aussi pour Orange dans ce panel animé par Martine.
Try again.
I'm glad to be here too for Orange in this panel led by Martine.
What are your next professional projects for Liveboxes?
Nous allons déployer évidemment de nouvelles technologies sur nos Livebox dans différentes géographies.
We will obviously deploy new technologies on our Liveboxes in different geographies.
What's the latest movie that you really enjoyed?
J'ai vu un film français qui s'appelle À bicyclette, qui est vraiment remarquable et que je vous recommande.
I saw a French film called A Bicycle, which is truly remarkable and I recommend.
Thank you, Shem.
Merci.
So you saw a little bit what is possible. This is going to get only better and better. Now let me take a hard turn and explain to you what are the challenges in terms of wireless. As I told you, these things weigh 8 grams more than normal Ray-Ban glasses, which means that the battery is extremely limited, which means that the processing cannot be done in the glasses. So it will be done either in your smartphone, or in a box, or in a PC. And the way to do that is for the glasses to wake up, transmit data super fast with low latency. The processing is done somewhere else, and it goes back to the glasses. So 2 things about that. Latency, very important. Data rate, very important, so that the glasses don't have to stay awake 1 second too long. And the last thing is that you think about the internet as something going from a device to a data center in the cloud. This is the world of yesterday. For this kind of application, the communication will be here. Personal area connectivity is the most important thing. So for these glasses to work well, they will need to have a great Wi-Fi connectivity to a device, and then the connectivity from the device to the internet, that is a lot more relaxed. So in terms of what you're providing to your fiber consumer within the home, ideally is a fantastic Wi-Fi connectivity. You may want to have some kind of processing power in your boxes so that the glasses work well. And once again, I mean, it's all about personal area connectivity, so making sure that this thing connect fast at low latency. It will not transmit like gigabits and gigabits of data, but when it's transmitting, it needs to be at gigabit speed and at low latency. Thank you.
So thank you all for these introductions. And I think that the demo and the last point also shows a little bit, everything is changing a little bit, everything starts to blend together a little bit. We need different parts of connectivity, and they all need to come together to offer us what we need. And it's great to hear kind of all the way from the side of Europe and the research and the standards, the technology, the operators deploying, and then the applications that finally can use this. That also all need to come together. So we have lots of stuff that we can talk about. I'm sure we won't touch upon everything, but you can come to us afterwards as well and talk. But one of the starting points for me was to think about the access networks. And we already touched upon it a little bit, and then Guillaume at the end mentioned these personal area networks. So there's this whole thing, when you talk about wireless connectivity, it's now in so many places, in the access network, inside the home, in the personal area network. And so you have this idea of there's indoor connectivity, there's outdoor, and that makes life a little bit complicated, unfortunately, but that's why we're here. But I was also thinking, how does this kind of blend together, or do we need different standards, and how are they going to work together? So maybe, Guillaume, you can say something, this personal area network. Do you think that's going to be, let's say, more or less just Wi-Fi technology, or do we need different standards for the shorter distance separate communication?
Yeah, for the shorter distance, I mean, it's whichever technology works best. So typically for these glasses, you're going to have a mix of Bluetooth when you just want to do low latency audio. Wi-Fi is going to do the majority of the work, just because that's the one which can do very wide bandwidth and at very low power. And then ultra-wideband will also be useful to scan the room, do things like radar detection, image detection. So this kind of, but it's really any technology as long as it's really high bandwidth and really low power.
Yeah, okay. Looking at the outdoor side, we know Wi-Fi, you said it's kind of mostly indoor technology that we use it for. And then was it you, Christophe, that said you might want some internet connectivity in your garden as well? So of course it extends a bit, but it matches quite well with the sort of the shorter range. Maybe Kevin, you can say something about expectations for Wi-Fi 8. It's kind of, we look into the future a bit. We now just have Wi-Fi 7, and even we have Wi-Fi 7, we realize it's still not quite perfect yet, right? We need a little bit more. So what do we have to look forward to as far as kind of it's already known, because it's early days?
Sure, and I guess I'd leave with the caveat of, it's still very much early days for Wi-Fi 8, and with Wi-Fi 7, the certified version of it, really just launching last January of 2024. But I think it's in this consistent theme of what we've seen. So as I said earlier, beginning with Wi-Fi 6, you really started to see the beginnings of the shift from just speeds to also being a little bit more about the consistency of the experience by bringing in things like OFDMA, right, that allow you to deal with lower latency. We built on that with Wi-Fi 7 with things like MLO. Yes, we did increase the speeds, right, but we built on it with things like MLO that now get you even higher reliability, with sending redundant packets, or being able to look at multiple links and saying, okay, well, which link is available first, so I can get more deterministic latency. Wi-Fi 8 just kind of takes that to the next level. It's really going to be all about high reliability. Again, as I mentioned earlier, even to the point where we're pushing into more use cases where you would typically rely only upon wired or even licensed spectrum, maybe in something like a fulfillment center, that you can now do with Wi-Fi 8. Because we're now also, so I guess the other point I would say kind of a trend is we've gone from the early days when we were concerned about the number on the box. It was often about one link from one client device to the AP, what is theoretically possible. Okay, well now with coming into Wi-Fi 7, it starts becoming what is it that the system can deliver? Because we know you're going to have dense deployments. In stadiums in the US, sometimes like 100,000 fans all using Wi-Fi in what they call the bowl, right? And that's incredibly demanding. And so now that next trend with Wi-Fi 8, in order to deliver that high reliability, is coordination, right? So again, now it's not just one AP, how it interacts with lots of clients, but how are the access points and the network infrastructure actually coordinating to deliver that high reliability and consistency. So again, I think it's all kind of in this trend. I know you like to say, like, well, it's not perfect yet. Well, Wi-Fi 8 also probably won't be perfect, and we'll have some. But the point is, like, that's just generally, I think, where the trends are going and how you see the natural evolution of the technology. And I really just think it reflects how critical Wi-Fi is, and that's why we have to deliver these capabilities, because it's just being used in more and more use cases.
Yeah, that's what I always say is, it's incredible how much the technology has advanced in the 20 years or so that we've been using it, and we're still not happy with it. But it's because our requirements on the technology have gone up quite the same way.
Yeah. Well, I think our expectations
have
evolved too, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So it feels the same, even though it's not. Maybe Christoph, because this reliability, of course, is important. It was mentioned, fiber is very reliable, it's great, and then you get the Wi-Fi and it's not quite as great. How does that work in the deployment? You've been using 6 gigahertz, you mentioned, it helps a lot. Is it reliable enough for that what needs to be done, or are you also kind of anxiously waiting for Wi-Fi 8?
I can't say we're anxiously waiting. We are seeing that we are now throwing just bandwidth at a problem. That means, okay, at the moment it's enough bandwidth for the current deployment with 6E. Nevertheless, we are looking mostly towards Wi-Fi 7 at the moment to have the full bandwidth, either the capabilities to offer huge streams or a multiple of lesser streams to a variety of devices from different APs in the application. Nevertheless, yes, we look towards Wi-Fi 8 more from a B2B perspective, because it raises the picture to have a more reliable and more, let's say, secure environment for all the business users we envisage. And where some people might think that it's a 5G private deployment, it might also be done even more cost-effective by Wi-Fi 8. So first thing will be for Wi-Fi 8, we think in the business sector. Nevertheless, we have to define the business sector more broadly than we do today. So it might not be a factory, but it might be somebody at home in his garage doing vital work using the equipment that Guillaume just presented, and whatever we can think of in the coming years. Yeah. So we don't know. We just want to deliver the capabilities for our customers, be it a retail customer or a business customer, to do what he thinks he needs to do, and he can take it from there.
Yeah. And the coordination, I guess, is important. Kevin mentioned in the standards, because right now an AP is just doing its best, and who knows what will happen, because who knows what the neighbors are doing. So I think this also, as we use the technology more and more, is going to be very important to keep up. Shem, in Orange, you have, of course, both 5G and you have the fixed networking. My feeling is mobile has always been perceived as much more reliable, because it's kind of more set up to, if you make a phone call, of course, classically, you don't want that interrupted, and that's what the network is very good at. And that's lots of uncoordinated users doing stuff. How do you see this in the home environment with, let's say, coordination with access points and stuff?
So as I said, somehow we have to make sure that the magics keep working. So this goes back to using the right technologies. You mentioned Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. We see also in the home with smart home a new technology around the radio, which is called Fred. So it's going to be a blend of all technologies, and you need to make sure that you use the right one depending on the type of services and applications. We need also, as I said, for instance, where there is no fixed broadband coverage, to bring fixed wireless access typically, or when there is a problem with the fixed broadband coverage, to have kind of backup solutions. And Obviously, with the expectations of our customers, again, today now, it's vital to have a good connection in your home space because you are going to work, or your kids, they have a class, or you have a medical appointment. So you need to make sure that there is always a solution, maybe a backup solution, or this right kind of gathering of different technologies. So this is why also we keep on our side, following the evolution of the standards. Wi-Fi 7 was mentioned. We start the rollout. We are starting right now the rollout in some of our geographies of Wi-Fi 7. And it's less also about throughput, but reliability, managing multiple devices and more devices. So we know we'll end up with more devices, more applications, requirements for low latency, which are going to be even more critical. And in that respect, we expect the different standards to kind of evolve as the usage and services that we want to promote are also becoming quite widespread across our geographies.
So one of the things that's interesting, I said in my introduction also, wireless is not as good as fiber, right? And it's very easy to look at the bandwidth because it's the number, like Kevin, you said, the number on the box, it's the easiest one to look at. And I think we are making a transition in fiber to stop marketing the speeds and start thinking more about other aspects. And maybe it's something that we need to do a little bit more consciously in wireless applications as well, because none of you are, I think, kind of saying, well, we need more speed on the Wi-Fi, but it is about how do you make the applications work. And Guillaume, you mentioned you need the speed, but it's kind of for different reasons, because then you can react fast and you can get it done. And so when we think about the speed classically, you think, well, if I have so much speed, I can do so much data and so on. But that's not, sometimes it's still the point, I know, but it's not kind of the point for many of these new applications. You need to wake up, do something, and then go back to sleep. And then other people have the room. Maybe Esabeth, on your side, you sort of doing the early research on the 6G networking concepts. Is there anything on that side that kind of is happening to look at the speeds and the reliability in different aspects?
So I think that when we speak, especially from, let's say, from the integration of fiber perspective, I think that what our projects are looking at, and I think that what we would all want, is actually in the new 6G architecture to ensure that fiber is integrated in a way that we harness all the very well-known benefits of fiber. Obviously, speed will, I guess, continuously increase, but I think it's a clear trend that we see that speed is not anymore the key kind of factor. It's important, but low latency, security, resilience, the ability to transfer and ultimately process large amounts of data, actually to integrate with AI, I think are also very, very important components. I think that what we see is clearly a trend of convergence between different connectivity technologies, but also with all these adjacent areas which traditionally had been quite separate. So we have to work very closely on, and indeed I would say, nearly 90% of our projects work on different aspects of the use of AI, softwareization, open RAN. So I think a lot of architectural aspects, but also the other key inputs, such as chips, microelectronics, for example. So, and then, as I mentioned, I think at the very beginning, if you look at the vision, which really sees that there are indeed completely new network-based features, such as sensing, for example, then we are really moving out of the traditional paradigm of connectivity, which I think our colleagues were more discussing very much the connectivity aspect. Here, I think we are talking about network-based services which did not exist or have not existed in this form that we are talking about just yet.
Okay, Christoph, you want to?
For me, one aspect is important to always keep in mind. We talk a lot about technological convergence and that resilience or whatever technical aspect that might converge between Wi-Fi 7 and 6G, but one aspect is fundamentally different at the moment. Wi-Fi 8, Wi-Fi 7, 6, 7, whatever, is deployed by the end user, is deployed by not by the network operator, but the investment decision or decision to set up a Wi-Fi network is made by everyone, by the retail customer, by a business customer, etc. Whereas the Gs, 3, 5, 4, 6G is an investment decision and a decision made by a network operator. And that's why we are trying to work the magic for the customer, but the customer takes the decision in this case. And that's what's fundamentally different, what we have to keep in mind if we're talking about those different aspects. How can we, in our case, help consumers or businesses set up the best for them and let them and enable them to take a conscious decision? And on the other hand, what are investment decisions and rollout decisions by network operators? And that makes a big difference in the paradigm.
I think it's interesting point because the convergence topic, and we'll get back to it a little bit more, which kind of was more or less promised when 5G came, and then everything kind of should start coming together, and that hasn't happened, at least not yet. And now we're talking about 6G and what comes next, and we talked a little bit before the panel. The investments are potentially huge. So even though also the 6G is like 2030, right? So we have a couple of years to find the money, I guess. But that's going to be a big question on investment. Is that going to happen? But I think the kind of fundamental difference a little bit between the 6G mobile technology and the Wi-Fi is indeed how is it controlled, how is it managed? And the inherent problem with Wi-Fi, to make it reliable, is, it is kind of uncoordinated because everybody makes their own local decision and the neighbors do something different and so on. So I really look forward to the coordination in Wi-Fi 8 that's going to at least be better, because this is now, I think, one of the big problems in Wi-Fi, and the speeds are, pretty decent and so on. And even if we have half the spectrum, then it's at least something and so on. But the coordination is going to help us squeeze out that last bit of reliability that we probably need for the applications to coexist.
So if I may, in that respect, what we are trying to do also is, make sure that people are installing the different equipments like the gateways and repeaters at the right location, and to help them, because at the end of the day, it's not so much about the technology merit itself, but just like the configuration and the way people use them. If you put your gateway in the garage and then you expect very high bandwidth and low latency, like 100 meters away in your living room, there might be a problem. So we need to make sure that people are doing the right thing. And again, it has to be simple. So we are looking at different types of solutions like maps and heat maps and just giving them the right advice, because again, at the end of the day, it's going to be about the quality of service and experience. Otherwise, they would just call us and complain, which they would be rightfully doing so. And by the way, when something goes wrong, usually in the home space, the only number that they have is ours. If they have a problem with a service, it might be the service, but the only number that they know how to call is ours. So we need really to try to avoid things going wrong.
Yeah, you need an insight in the network for sure. Yeah.
I think Shem is spot on. What matters is how people experience the technology. That's the only thing that will convince them to put more money into the next generation. We all went from 3G to 4G and it changed our life. Suddenly our smartphones were working. Same experience going from the previous fixed access technology to fiber, it really changes something. Now, going from 100 megabits to 1 gigabit at home, if it doesn't change the quality of what I receive on my wireless device, I'm not going to see the difference, and therefore I'm not going to pay more. So it's really about making sure that the consumer gets the extra quality of service that we want to sell them.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the ways that could help is this 6 gigahertz spectrum, right? We mentioned it before a couple of times. Kevin, you said if you want to give users the gigabit that they eventually need in a reliable way, half the band is not enough. Mm-hmm. You just barely get to your 1 gig. We know the headline speeds, they make you think other things, but this is kind of what will happen in reality. How critical is it to get this upper band available? And maybe, because the debate there, of course, is who gets the spectrum, all right? That's where we're in the middle of in Europe right now. Is there anything you can say about how you see that?
Sure, and I guess to answer the question of how critical is it, well, how critical is it that we actually deliver gigabit connectivity, right? and the answer to that is if it's critical, well, then the spectrum is critical. Again, I referenced that study, and people can go download it. It's by Plume Consulting, but it essentially looked at, okay, the difference between 5 160 megahertz channels. We're not even talking about the 320s, right? Because in most dense deployments, you actually need it's spectral reuse. You need a higher number of smaller channels. But 5 160 channels give you a 50% chance of hitting gigabit connectivity in a typical apartment complex. Period. Right? You're not going to get it. You need essentially 10 channels, which includes 7 and 6 plus 3 and the 5 gigahertz band of 160 channels to get you to effectively guaranteed or high probability of gigabit connectivity. So again, I think it absolutely is critical if you think you want to deliver gigabit connectivity.
I think
where we are right now is
to reiterate there, because I also think I don't have gigabit at home and I'm a happy user, but it's not the gigabit itself that you need. You need to have the fact that you can quickly do something.
Well, exactly. And when we say how important is it to have gigabit connectivity, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're steady state, full buffer, streaming 1 gigabit per second 24/7, right? That's not really what we're talking about. But there are use cases that need the ability to peak at that gigabit per second connectivity. And so that causes part of the issue. Now, what we're seeing, there are certainly regions where you have the full 1200 megahertz available, US, Canada, Brazil, South Korea, et cetera. And in Europe right now, we are, yes, we have half the band, and we continue to debate the upper part of the band. There might be some positive momentum towards getting Wi-Fi into the full band quickly, while some of that additional debate on the upper part of the band gets resolved. But wherever that goes, the 1200 megahertz is kind of the key piece. One way or another, Wi-Fi has to get access to that amount of spectrum. Before 6 gigahertz, Wi-Fi has been operating on the same frequency band since its inception, right? So for 25 years, we found other ways to eke out that performance. But we're getting to the point where really spectrum is the oxygen for Wi-Fi.
Can I give an example?
Let's hear from Christopher. I know he has an opinion on this topic.
Kevin, I want to raise you one. I'm not talking about gigabit speeds anymore. If I look into the pathway we have for fixed fiber connections, it's multi-gigabit.
I know.
And therefore, we need also multi-gigabit Wi-Fi connectivity, and that's only going to get with the 1200.
No, exactly. I'm just talking about the floor.
Interesting. And second thing, if we look into the other picture, what does the cellular or IMT really need? If we see into mature markets like China, etc., we're seeing flat growth in the handheld, so in the cellular market. But we see continuous growth in whatever is offloaded onto Wi-Fi, so for the home use, and with all the new applications that one of them, Guillaume, just presented us, this is going to grow.
Yeah, Guillaume.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about competition, especially with the new geopolitical environment and this kind of thing. You in Europe as fiber operators have done a fantastic job. There's great fiber in many houses. The reality is that the same glasses that we sell in the US, will be able to operate on a 160 megahertz channel, whereas in Europe, they're going to operate on 80 megahertz channel. That means the battery life is going to be twice as long in the US as it is here, and the latency is going to be twice as high here than it is in the US, despite all the investment that you've done in fiber. So basically, if the spectrum is not available, all the investment that have been made in the fiber goes down the drain.
No, that's not good news.
Maybe just for the 6G, it's very early days to speak about specific spectrum bands. So the work of the radio spectrum policy group has started, as they had done previously on 5G, that they carry out a massive mapping exercise on the relevant spectrum bands, and that is only expected to be work completed by 2030. So it's a bit premature. But there is one aspect, though, that I would like to add to the discussion, which is complementary. So I think we are discussing here a lot about consumers, how they behave in their homes or with their handheld or other devices. But I think that the ambition of the Digital Decade program, for example, goes far beyond consumer use. So it's very much about the digitalization of industries, not only the large industrial sectors, which are kind of key drivers of the European economy, but also SMEs. And I think that some of the key features and also some of the key use case families that I had shown are actually much more focused on these new industrial use cases, which will ultimately translate into consumer services, but not indeed the connectivity services as we know it today. And I think we have to be open to this sort of move or shift, if you like, almost a paradigm shift that I think is happening in terms of connectivity. That is not only how you receive connectivity on your device or in your home, but how it actually transforms other services from healthcare to transport that you're consuming as a consumer. And therefore, the picture is not as simple as, okay, you install your own Wi-Fi at home. It's I think, actually a much more complex picture and a much more complex challenge going forward. Clearly, what I'm talking about is not the tomorrow. It's beyond 2030.
No, I think that's a good point. Looking into the future is hard. You kind of said it, right? But we know stuff will come, applications will come. So far, I'm always reminded every time you think, well, I don't know what we are going to use this new technology bandwidth, whatever, for yet. Somebody will come up with the idea once it's available. And it would be not very, it would be logical to assume that that's still going to happen. We can assume, well, maybe now we have enough, now it's the end, but more likely than not, it's not the case. And we find uses for it as we go anyway, for sure.
But so, if I could just briefly say something though, because I mean, I agree with you. I know we've been very focused on kind of consumer, in-home broadband applications. But I think one of the positive steps, at least that I've seen in the discussion around 6G, is a recognition of the indoor aspect of connectivity going forward, right? That when you talk about the industrial use cases, yes, there's the mining and things like that are outdoor, but a lot of this is still indoor connectivity. And also, I think what's been promising is the talk about better integration of other technologies. So how does Wi-Fi potentially fit into 6G to deliver that indoor connectivity? So it is a bigger, more complicated picture, but I think particularly for the fiber community, it's important to understand that a lot of this is innovation that's going to be happening indoors, and fiber is going to be the way that high-performance connectivity gets into the building. And then it's a matter of whether it's Wi-Fi or some other private wireless that's going to deliver the kind of that last few meters of connectivity.
Yeah. And by the way, if I can make an additional comment, if we keep being serious about sustainability, obviously these days it's a word that is kind of disappearing from conferences, but we have as a company made public statements about that, and we are working hard to make it happen. So we'll have to look also at the balance of technologies to make it efficient. So for instance, we know that delivering a video service through fiber plus Wi-Fi is more efficient than using a full mobile technology. So we have also to look at that and take that into considerations. And now actually when we are planning for a new service, we do the maths and we take this element into the big picture to make a decision. And I think moving forward, as we have kind of combination of technology, we'll have to make sure also that from a sustainability standpoint, we make the best decisions.
I think it's good if we keep a little bit of focus on sustainability. It's going to help all of us. It's still very necessary, even if some people get tired of it, and we'll see what happens. I think what we're touching upon here is a little bit this idea of convergence. We talked about it a little bit before. I'm always reminded that wireless connectivity, in the end, kind of comes down to physics. Right? It's radio waves, they have certain properties, and that's kind of how it works. And it puts some limits on what you can do. We can make the technology smarter, we can make it better. But in the end, there's only so much air. If you get more spectrum, it helps. And the different applications, in my mind, indoor, outdoor, and all of that, they're all relevant, they're all necessary. But if things don't work well together, it's still going to be problematic. So the idea of convergence, I think, is great. I think I mentioned before with the 5G, and so far we haven't really seen it happen so much. I hear people being a little bit more optimistic towards next generation technology. And I guess we will find out only then. But I don't know if anybody has an opinion on where convergence is heading.
I guess I'll make one big point, which is this is not a technology issue with convergence. It has nothing to do with the technology. The technology for convergence, multiple technologies for convergence have existed. It tends to be more around business model or investment, or it's more of those types of considerations. And I'll use some examples. So in the U.S., for 2 out of the 3 operators, every phone that they have been selling for the last probably 3 to 5 years, maybe even more than that, has the ability to seamlessly offload to a public Wi-Fi network, right? So every single phone. So when I went to Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, I walked into FIRA, and guess what happened? My phone used its AT&T SIM credential, and it automatically authenticated to the Wi-Fi network in the building. Easy peasy, no problem, seamless. And I had great Wi-Fi connectivity. In fact, they did have 6 gigahertz actually in FIRA this year. And it works great. So the technology is there to enable it. And it's a matter of the service providers, and particularly the fixed operators, what are they doing to help enable bringing those devices onto their networks? I'll use an example. I apologize, it's another US one, but Comcast, so their Ookla, had a recent report, and they were looking at what's happening with offload. Comcast is an MVNO, so of course they're paying for every bit they're putting over the partner MNO's network. So they're very much incentivized to get traffic onto their Wi-Fi networks. They're now surpassing 90% of their handset traffic. They're able to get onto Wi-Fi, using technologies that have been out for 10 plus years. So again, it's not a technology problem. It's kind of the will and the investment in getting through some of those business challenges.
For sure.
I think.
Sorry.
No, I think that another key aspect of convergence that we are seeing is really, I think, in the direction of computing. So as many of you have seen, the European Commission has set out this convergence vision of the connected collaborative computing networks in its white paper, and I think that the feedback that we are receiving is that the convergence is real. I think it is to be seen indeed how actually it translates into business cases. So I think that's a different question, but I think that the technology convergence is a real trend. There are trends which can be identified at this moment, as we know, and I foresee that there will be additional trends as technology evolves. I think that it doesn't need any recognition that AI and the use of AI in networking to make networks more cost efficient, automated, et cetera, is a very, very clear trend. And as I said, 6G is really forcing to be the first native AI network. So we really see, I think, how complexity is indeed increasing in the domain of networks, simply because there are evolutions or even almost revolutions in also adjacent technologies which are key inputs and need to be integrated. With regard to AI, it's not only AI for the network, so to make 6G better, but also how then future networks will serve the requirements of the future evolved AI models. So I think that there is this very clear kind of interconnectedness that we see as a trend, which no doubt I think will evolve going forward in probably ways that we foresee and ways that we can't foresee today.
All right, Jim.
I think from a user standpoint, what you want is that tomorrow in this kind of convergence vision, at any time, your service provider, your operator, gives you access to a bunch of services in the best way or form, which means that you don't know what is the access network, but it's the most efficient, but potentially the most sustainable. You don't know if this is AI, which is being processed in the edge or somewhere in the cloud, but the service is running properly at the best cost, efficiently, with low latency. So, and again, it happens seamless. I'm kind of going back again to my magic thing.
Magic, yeah.
That's really what people expect. They don't want to get into like, by the way, 6G, is it 6? Is it the spectrum? Is it the mobile standard? Even internally, sometimes people get confused when you, so obviously, as a customer, you don't want to get into that. You just want the most efficient service happening, and you want someone to take care of that. And yesterday, I think in one of the panel, people saying that operators, we are buying complexity, but we have to sell simplicity. That's really about that.
I think that maybe that's a good note to kind of end on the magic. So maybe the conclusion is, no matter what happens, first of all, there will be some form of convergence. Things will grow together. They have to. It'll happen even if the business models are making it very difficult at the moment. But that's good. And the wireless technologies will remain magic for most people, as they should, because the users should not be bothered by how it works and what's needed. It should just work. So no matter if it's Wi-Fi 8 or 6G mobile technology or something else, it should just work. And I hear good things coming in the standards that will help us go forward. Well, thank you very much for that. Thanks to our speakers. I don't know if there are any questions, burning questions from the audience. Here we go. There's a question here.
Why you have wired your glasses to your suit?
It's just because the sound which is coming from the glasses typically can only be heard from me. So you come afterwards and you'll see that the music, you will hear the music, I will hear nothing. So for you to be able to hear the translation, we had to have a microphone. But the glasses obviously don't have cables.
And now I have to say that Guillaume speaks perfect French.
All right. Yeah.
Okay, I'm Alex from TCL, and I have one question for you, and it is like this: that the technology evolves. We hope to bring better experiences to all the users. But actually, for example, the Wi-Fi, when we upgrade 8 to Wi-Fi 7 or 8, but when users order the broadband service from FTTH or such kind, but he feels that it is not that fast as expected. Why? Because maybe his cell phone or laptop is still Wi-Fi 5 or 6. That's not much. So from this system view, is there a possible resolution for this? And maybe Mr. Orange Chan.
That's a good question. Obviously, like when we talk about Wi-Fi 7, we know that at this very moment, you don't have so many devices which are compatible. So it's back to, we have to find tricks to make sure that, it's not disappointing. Like, okay, I have somewhere a sticker with Wi-Fi 7, and then when I'm connecting a device, it's telling me that it's not working. So you have to potentially automatically, get to the right band, if there is band steering, or to the right Wi-Fi technology which is available. And again, it's back to, okay, you have to hide the complexity, because otherwise, as you said, you would create disappointment. So we have also to be, in our communication to our customers, quite transparent and manage expectations. Because if you say now you have Wi-Fi 7 and people expect all the devices to work, suddenly it's not going to happen. So we have also to manage expectations and communicating about that. It's not that easy, because then you need to get into the technical aspects. But so we have either to find technical solutions, or we have to make sure that people understand what they can do and what they can't do.
And I think it has to do with the longevity of the device. So if it's a laptop and it's 5 to 6 years or slower, then in the end, for the long tail, we need some additional equipment like a dongle or whatever, and I think the market will then provide for that one. Once it comes to the real long tail and you want to use your 10-year-old laptop again. But for me, it's an investment cycle that will take also the consumer devices. And not only for what you're saying, this is Wi-Fi 7 or Wi-Fi 8. Currently, we have all the interfaces, especially in laptops, etc., at 1 gig. But in the future, that might not be enough. So there will be another cycle that we also see larger interface performances needed.
It's an interesting dynamic, because from sustainability viewpoint, we would like people to use their devices for longer. And then from this perspective, you might say, yeah, now please buy all new devices so you can use the new technology.
Yes, that's a long story, and maybe there might be portfolio products can be provided to the common users. They don't have to know exactly the technique specific between Wi-Fi 5, 6, 7, 8, and beyond, corresponding to their laptops and such devices.
Okay. So what we are trying to do, back to what Christophe said, is when we can, it's not always possible, is that when we make the design of, for instance, the gateways, and we know that the new technology is going to come in like 2 or 3 years, we make it modular enough so at some point in time, we can take it back to the factory and change a component and then upgrade the device, which extends the life of the device, which is good, and which makes available the latest technology to our customers. But you have to take that into account from day one, which usually brings an extra cost, which gets you into an interesting discussions with the CFOs.
Of course, yeah.
And just very briefly, one thing. So, it's kind of an inside baseball thing, but there's, for example, initiatives to standardize mechanisms for. So already operators can get a lot of telemetry that are coming out of gateways using things like data elements, TR369 out of broadband form, et cetera. But actually having standards-based ways for clients to essentially advertise what generation, what capabilities they have. So an operator can actually look in their environment and say, okay, they're having a problem with this device. It happens to be a Wi-Fi 4 device. You want to hide, you want to make it magic, but maybe they can communicate, hey, your printer, we noticed that your printer may not be operating as well as it could. It's a 4th generation device. Have you thought about, buying a new printer? And by the way, maybe they sell, I don't know, maybe they sell one. But so you can actually have an idea of what is happening in that environment, and maybe encouraging where it makes sense for somebody to upgrade. Because obviously Wi-Fi doesn't have the same forced obsolescence that, say, happens in cellular, where they can turn off a network. We have to find ways to encourage adoption of newer standards where it makes sense.
Yeah, and the insight is very important. If once you can do something about it, then as an operator especially. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, so we are out of time. I don't want to rob everybody of the break, so thank you very much, and thanks especially to our speakers here on stage. Thank you.